Welcome back to another video. Today we will cover an intriguing case that is currently before the courts in Manchester. It is a very tricky one. As always, viewer discretion is advised. Right, so there's a case currently in progress at Minshull Street Crown Court in Manchester that I think we need to talk about, because it raises some really difficult questions about consent, about responsibility, and about where the law draws the line when things go catastrophically wrong behind closed doors. A 28-year-old man called Josh Baxter is on trial accused of killing someone he met through the dating app Grindr. The victim in this case was Michael Barron, who was 38 years old at the time of this incident. The two of them met at Baxter's flat in Blackley, which is in North Manchester, on the 26th of January 2025. Now, for those who might not be familiar with it, Grindr is a location-based dating and social app primarily used by gay and bisexual men. It was launched back in 2009 and was actually one of the first apps to combine dating with GPS technology. The way it works is straightforward enough. You create a profile, and the app shows you other users nearby, arranged by how close they are to you. You can message people, share photos, arrange to meet. It has around 13.5 million monthly users worldwide, and it's become, for better or worse, the dominant way that gay men meet each other for casual encounters. Some people use it for dating, some for friendships, but let's be honest, it's predominantly known as a hookup app, and that's fine. Consenting adults can do what they want in private. But what happened in that flat in Blackley on that January night ended with Michael Barron dead on a bedroom floor. Let me tell you a bit about where this happened, because place matters in these stories. Blackley is a suburb about 4 miles north of Manchester city centre, sat along the River Irk. It's got a long history going back to the Domesday Book actually. The name comes from the Anglo-Saxon word meaning dark wood or dark clearing. For generations it was a village surrounded by fields and woodland, but during the 1930s it was swallowed up by Manchester's urban expansion as the city built housing for its growing population. These days, Blackley is a mixed area. You've got pockets of relative comfort alongside streets that have struggled with deprivation for decades. A study by the Open Society Foundations described Higher Blackley as having significant pockets of deprivation alongside areas of relative affluence, a majority white working-class community that has undergone social change. It's the kind of place where families have lived for generations, where there's a strong sense of community and belonging, but also where economic hardship has left its mark. There's Heaton Park nearby, one of the largest municipal parks in Western Europe, over 600 acres of green space. The area has good transport links into the city centre. It's not rough, but it's not wealthy either. It's somewhere in between, like so many parts of the north of England. The specific address where Michael Barron died was a flat on Lakeside Rise, a block of flats in that part of Blackley. Josh Baxter lived there. He's from Blackley himself, local to the area. Michael Barron, on the other hand, was not from Manchester at all. He was originally from Piltown in County Kilkenny, Ireland, and had lived in Waterford before moving to England. He was 38 years old and had connections to Liverpool, where he occasionally worked at a venue called Masquerade, an LGBTQ bar. After his death, tributes poured in from people who knew him. His sister Lorraine described him as their fabulous brother and said the family were heartbroken. Others remembered him as a true character, someone born to shine. He was, by all accounts, a man with friends who cared about him, family who loved him, and a life that was cut short in the most terrible circumstances. Now, from what the court has heard, Michael and Josh had been messaging each other on Grindr before they met in person, and those messages were explicit. They discussed rough sex, choking, being tied up. The prosecution has described what was planned as high-risk sexual activity. According to prosecutors, Baxter encouraged Barron to drink large quantities of alcohol before they got together. In court evidence stated that Barron drank almost an entire bottle of vodka, and then they went to the shop to get more alcohol. When they returned, Barron finished off what was left and had 2 more vodka and lemonades on top of that. A toxicology report presented to the jury revealed that Michael Barron had 417 milligrams of alcohol per 100 milliliters of blood when he died. To put that in context, the legal limit for driving in this country is 80 milligrams, so he was more than 5 times over the limit. The forensic pathologist told the court that fatal alcohol toxicity is generally considered to be around 350 milligrams. Michael Barron was well above even that threshold. What happened next, according to the prosecution, is that Baxter restrained Barron face down on the bed, using red rope tied around his ankles and wrists. In his own statement to police, Baxter admitted tying him up, saying he knotted the rope not very tightly. He then had sex with him while Barron was in that position, slapping him on the back, which he claims was pre-agreed. But here's where it gets darker. Baxter told police that he realized Barron had fallen asleep because he was making snoring noises. He said he then fell asleep himself whilst on top of Barron and woke up 30 minutes later. Let that sit for a moment. He fell asleep on top of a man who was tied up, face down, restrained, unable to move, for half an hour. The prosecution alleges that during the encounter, Baxter strangled or choked Barron with such force that he fractured bone and cartilage in his neck. The forensic pathologist, Dr. Jamie Robinson, explained to the jury that the hyoid bone, which sits at the top of the neck, had been broken. The thyroid cartilage, which forms what we call the Adam's apple, was also fractured. There was a curved abrasion around the side of Barron's neck that could have been caused by a fingernail. Fracturing the hyoid bone is significant. Medical experts will tell you that breaking this particular bone typically requires sustained pressure, not a momentary squeeze. It's the kind of injury that speaks to prolonged, forceful compression of the throat. Michael Barron suffered cerebral hypoxia, which means his brain was starved of oxygen. He went into cardiac arrest, and he was pronounced dead right there in that bedroom. Now here's what disturbs me most about the prosecution's account of events. After all of this, after whatever happened on that bed, Josh Baxter left Michael Barron. He ordered a takeaway on Deliveroo. He messaged other men on Grindr, and it was only later that he claims to have realized Barron was unresponsive. By that point, the prosecution says, Barron had turned what was described as deep purple in color. When paramedics arrived at the flat, they found Michael Barron on the bedroom floor. In court, paramedic Lindsay Joyce stated it was quite clear, almost immediate, that he had died. But here's another detail the jury has been told about. After the encounter, Baxter was doing Google searches. And what was he searching for? If you accidentally kill someone by strangling them in sex, do you go to prison? He also searched purple face while sleeping. And if someone died during kinky sex, would you go to prison? Now, I'm not a lawyer, but if you're genuinely in shock, if you genuinely believe you've done nothing wrong, is that the first thing you'd be searching for? Or does that suggest something else was going through his mind? That he knew, on some level, that something had gone very badly wrong and he was already thinking about the consequences for himself? Baxter has admitted that he choked Barron. That's not in dispute. What he denies is manslaughter, intentional strangulation or suffocation, and unlawfully inflicting grievous bodily harm. His defense is that those messages they'd exchanged beforehand, all that talk about rough sex and choking, it was just fantasy, roleplay. He says he didn't intend to hurt him. In his testimony, he told the court that Barron didn't indicate he was in pain, that the noises Barron was making, Baxter interpreted them as pleasurable. He thought Barron was enjoying himself. And look, this is the defense that gets rolled out in these cases, isn't it? The rough sex gone wrong defense. We've seen it before, and we'll see it again. Let me take you through some of the cases that have come before this one, because they matter. They matter for understanding the legal landscape, and they might well influence how the jury thinks about what happened in that flat in Blackley. In December 2018, a 22-year-old British backpacker named Grace Millane was strangled to death in New Zealand by a man she had met on the dating app Tinder. Her killer argued that she had asked to be choked during sex, that it was consensual rough sex that went wrong. The jury didn't buy it. He was convicted of murder and given life imprisonment. But what emerged during that trial was chilling. After killing Grace, he didn't call for help. Instead, he watched violent X-rated films while her body lay in the room. He also took intimate photographs of her corpse, trophy pictures. He then stuffed her into a suitcase and buried her in a forested area outside Auckland. And still, he tried to claim it was an accident, a sex game gone wrong. The Grace Millane case sparked outrage, not just because of what happened to her, but because of how her character was picked apart during the trial. Headlines focused on her interest in BDSM, her dating history, her previous relationships, as if any of that mattered, as if any of that justified what was done to her. The campaign group We Can't Consent to This was established in the wake of cases like hers, and they've done extraordinary work tracking how often this defense is used. Here in the United Kingdom, the case that really brought this issue to public attention was that of Natalie Connolly. She was a 26-year-old mother of one who died in December 2016 at the home she shared with her partner, a millionaire property developer called John Broadhurst. After a night of drinking and taking cocaine, Broadhurst claimed they had engaged in consensual rough sex. He then went to bed and slept while Natalie lay bleeding at the bottom of the stairs. When he called the emergency services the next morning, he told the operator he had found her, dead as a donut. Natalie Connolly had suffered more than 40 separate injuries. She had a blowout fracture to her left eye socket. She had severe internal injuries caused by a bottle of carpet cleaner being inserted into her. She had bruises covering her body, and yet the prosecution dropped the murder charge partway through the trial and accepted a guilty plea to manslaughter by gross negligence. Broadhurst was sentenced to 3 years and 8 months. He served 22 months, less than 2 years for killing a woman who suffered more than 40 injuries at his hands. Natalie's twin sister Gemma spoke publicly about how the justice system had failed them. She said her sister wasn't into that kind of thing at all, that the rough sex defense was bogus. But the dead can't speak for themselves, can they? And Broadhurst's version of events became the only version that mattered in that courtroom. The Natalie Connolly case was instrumental in changing the law. In April 2021, the Domestic Abuse Act included a specific provision, Section 71, which states that consent for sexual gratification is not a defense for causing serious harm or death. You cannot consent to your own killing. You cannot consent to grievous bodily harm in the context of sexual activity. The campaign group We Can't Consent to This tracked at least 67 cases in the United Kingdom where rough sex, or a sex game gone wrong, was used as part of the defense. In 60 of those cases, the victim was female. Strangulation was the most common cause of death, appearing in around 2/3 of cases. And here's what should really concern you. In about 45% of those cases, the defense resulted in a lesser charge, a lighter sentence, an acquittal, or the case not being pursued at all. What's also emerged from the research is that this defense has increasingly been used in killings of LGBTQ people, with perpetrators often meeting their victims through dating apps. The dynamics are different in some ways, similar in others. The fundamental issue remains the same. One person ends up dead. The other claims it was all consensual, all agreed upon, just a terrible accident. But the dead person can't contradict that account. Which brings us back to Michael Barron. There's an asymmetry in all of these cases that troubles me deeply. One person ends up dead. The other person claims it was all consensual. But Michael Barron can't stand up in court and say what actually happened from his perspective. He can't say whether he changed his mind, whether he used a safe word, whether he tried to tap out, whether those noises Baxter claims were pleasurable were actually sounds of distress. We only have Baxter's account, and his account has to be weighed against the physical evidence. The fractures to the neck are going to be hard to explain away. Medical experts will have given evidence about the level of force required to cause that kind of damage. This isn't someone who got a bit carried away for a few seconds. Fracturing the hyoid bone and thyroid cartilage requires sustained pressure. It requires violence. And then there's the oxygen deprivation. Cerebral hypoxia doesn't happen instantaneously. The brain starts to suffer when blood flow and oxygen are cut off. There's a window there, a period of time during which, if you release the pressure, the person might survive. How long was Baxter's hands around Barron's throat? How long did he keep that pressure on? These are questions the jury will be grappling with. The prosecution has characterized Baxter's behavior as showing, and I'm quoting here, at best an indifference to Michael Barron's welfare. And that word, indifference, I think that's doing a lot of heavy lifting in this case, because leaving someone tied up, restrained, unable to move, face down on a bed, while you fall asleep on top of them, for 30 minutes, that's not the behavior of someone who's attentive to their partner's welfare, is it? That's not checking in. That's not making sure they're all right, and then to get up, leave them still bound, order a takeaway, message other men on Grindr, before finally noticing that something was badly wrong. That's not care. That's treating another human being as disposable. The Domestic Abuse Act of 2021 should, in theory, prevent the rough sex defense from being used successfully in cases like this. But the law only applies to domestic abuse cases, which typically requires an established relationship. Michael Barron and Josh Baxter met that day for the first time. They weren't partners. They weren't in a relationship. They were strangers who connected on an app and met for sex. That might create a legal grey area that the defense could try to exploit. What the jury will ultimately have to decide is whether this was, as Baxter claims, a fantasy that got out of hand with no intent to harm, or whether it was something more sinister. Whether Josh Baxter was reckless with another man's life, whether he caused his death through violence that he should have known was dangerous. Dating apps like Grindr have transformed how people meet. For the LGBTQ community in particular, these apps provided something revolutionary when they first appeared: the ability to find other gay people nearby, to connect safely, to build community in ways that simply weren't possible before. And the vast majority of encounters that happen through these apps are between consenting adults who both walk away unharmed. But these apps also create opportunities, private spaces, flats, where anything can happen behind closed doors. And when things go wrong, as they did in Blackley on the 26th of January, we're left with one person's account of what happened, and another person who can never tell their side of the story. Stephen Port, the so-called Grindr killer, showed us the darkest possibilities of this. Between 2014 and 2015, Port murdered 4 young gay men he met through dating apps, drugging them with lethal doses of GHB. He was convicted of 4 counts of murder and given a whole life sentence. But what was perhaps even more shocking than Port's crimes was the failure of the Metropolitan Police to connect the deaths, despite the bodies of 3 of his victims being found in the same location. There were serious questions raised about whether those deaths were taken less seriously because the victims were gay men who used dating apps. I'm not suggesting for a moment that Josh Baxter is comparable to Stephen Port. The circumstances are entirely different, but the broader context matters. When gay men die in circumstances involving casual sex or dating apps, there's sometimes a reluctance to dig deeper, an assumption that risky behavior was involved, that the victim somehow invited what happened to them. Michael Barron deserves better than that. His death deserves to be properly examined, properly understood, properly judged. And I suppose, sitting here talking about it, the question I keep coming back to is this: what does it take for someone to keep applying pressure to another person's throat, even as that person stops responding, even as they go limp, even as they start changing color? At what point do you notice something might be wrong? Because if the answer is not until I'd woken up 30 minutes later and ordered a takeaway and messaged other men on Grindr, and then started Googling whether I'd go to prison, then I'd suggest that tells us quite a lot about what was going on in Josh Baxter's mind that night. This case matters beyond the courtroom as well. It matters because it's part of a pattern. Dating apps have created new ways for people to meet, and that includes people who want to explore their sexuality, who want to push boundaries, and most of the time, that's fine. But these apps also create opportunities for harm, and when that harm occurs, the question becomes, how do we distinguish between genuine accidents and something more culpable? The legal framework that emerged from cases like Natalie Connolly's and Grace Millane's was designed to stop defendants from hiding behind claims of consent when they've killed or seriously injured someone. The principle is sound. You cannot consent to serious harm. But applying that principle in individual cases is never straightforward. Juries have to weigh competing accounts, assess credibility, interpret physical evidence, and make judgments about what happened behind closed doors, where the only living witness is the person accused of causing the death. Michael Barron was 38 years old. He had a life, he had people who cared about him, and now he's gone. Whatever verdict comes back from this trial, nothing changes that. A man is dead, and the person accused of killing him says it was all just a misunderstanding, just fantasy that went wrong. The trial continues at Minshall Street Crown Court. The jury will have their say soon enough. But for Michael Barron's family back in Kilkenny, for the people who knew him in Liverpool and beyond, there's no verdict that brings him back. There's just the grim reality of how his life ended, and the hope, I suppose, that some form of justice comes out of that courtroom in Manchester. I'll update you when the verdict comes in. If you made it to the end, please consider a subscribe to the channel as it helps to bring more free content like this.